Wonderful. Never been there. It's on my list. Got a lot of places on my list. uh, you guys said you weren't from Portugal, or somebody back there said they weren't from Portugal. So where are you guys from? Yeah, Norway. I've spoken in Norway 2 or 3 times. Love the country. Wonderful place. Um, I'm from Florida. At Tampa, Florida, actually. We just got hit by 2 hurricanes recently, which are the first two I haven't been there for in a long time. I'm born and raised in Florida. You could call me Florida man. So, growing up, I grew up in the Panhandle of Florida. Does anyone know where that is? Panhandle of Florida. Yeah, let me just do this real quick. Just do maps.google. We'll zoom out. We'll go across the water. So when we say the Panhandle of Florida, so I live here, so you can tell we got hit. This is what we call the Panhandle of Florida up here. Alabama's up there. This is the Panhandle. We also call it LA, Lower Alabama. It's a thing. But when we get hurricanes, they usually come in from the Atlantic and they either curl up the coast and hit the Carolinas, or they skirt down here and hit the Bahamas and Cuba and then come up into the Panhandle and Louisiana where Katrina hit, or maybe over here into Texas. So I lived right there, and that's Pensacola. Ivan, Dennis, like Katrina got the edges of it. Like I've been hit growing up by 12 hurricanes, like 4 or 5 direct hits. Like you go out in the eye of the storm and it's sunny and there's no wind and there's this wall of blackness everywhere around you. I've had the part of the roof ripped off my house. I've had no power for a month. I've had to eat MREs given to me by the National Guard. I've rowed a boat down my road before because it was 4 feet in the middle of the road. So, and I wasn't there. My wife was. But as a native Floridian, I don't live near the water. I'm 15 kilometers inland. I'm in a non-flood zone, non-evac zone, a block from a shelter. I have a generator and I have a gas grill. So if you run out of power, you take your frozen pizza or lasagna and you throw it on the grill. You run out of water, you drink your beer. I mean, I was talking to some people from New Zealand, and I told them like I don't mean to be like flippant or unsympathetic to the people that get hurt, but like after you've been through so many, it's like don't wake me up unless it's a 3, because like I know I'm pretty taken care of. They were saying that they live in a town that has 50 something volcanoes, and like foreigners visit, and they're like, oh my goodness, the lava levels are going up, and they're like, which one? How much? Okay, yeah. So like you get used to it. You get desensitized. Like if I was here and there was an earthquake, I'd probably be like, yeah, wait, oh, and a massage. Ah. Yeah, so you get used to stuff. I mean, that's why we eat our gators. If you ever visit Tampa, there's at least 3 restaurants I know of I can tell you that serve gator if you're ever interested. Yeah, it's good. I've had barbecue gator ribs, gator hush puppies, all sorts of stuff. Real tender. Real tender. All right, so we got some visitors from Iceland and Norway and Spain. Who else is not from Portugal? Who else is visiting? Where'd you come from? Belgium. I love Belgium. I was there earlier in the year for Techorama Belgium. I love Belgian beer. Tampa has 80 breweries, so we're getting in on that craft beer scene. But I mean, our country's only a couple hundred years old. You guys have been brewing beer over here for centuries. You got to come over here and drink beer. Yeah, awesome. Who else traveled to come here today? Yeah, where are you coming from, man? Austria. Oh, another fun place. I've not been there. I want to. It's on my list. I've been in Germany, in parts of Germany, but nice. So who knows anything about dev containers? Who's using containers today in production? Who's using containers in development? Who's using it just to spin up a database or a Redis or something like that? Who's actually using it for their tools? All right, we got some room to work with. I like it. We can learn. Who's heard of GitHub Codespaces? Not Copilot, Codespaces. All right. Who's ever tried them, used them? If you have a GitHub account as an individual user, you get 60 free hours of code spaces, if you did not know that. So you don't have to pay for it. You can actually go out to GitHub today and fire up a code space, which I'll show you how, and use it. So if you've got a crappy little Chromebook or an old laptop that's not powerful, you can still bring up a web browser and do some coding with a 16-core, 64 gig machine up in the cloud if you wanted. I'll show you. Like you get so many hours and so many minutes and spending based upon cores and stuff that affects time and usage. You know how it is. I don't talk pricing. I just talk ideas. I'm an ideas man. I don't control your wallet. Actually, I gave this same talk in Copenhagen at NDC Copenhagen Developer Fest, and I have one of those new Surface Copilot laptops. Has anyone heard of these? The ARM64 Snapdragon. Like they have the built-in like MPU on the machine. So, whoops, didn't mean to double click. There we go. So the 12-core Snapdragon with the MPU for AI stuff, Qualcomm. Well, I couldn't project in Copenhagen. I have 2 adapters with me. I borrowed 2 adapters. Couldn't get signal out because this outputs at 4K, and so if the things they use to record aren't the 4K decimators, they're just a standard decimator, you can't get signal from a Surface, like any Surface. That's just how it works. And I didn't have a spare laptop. So this time I actually brought a spare laptop just in case I couldn't present because like it bit me last time. So I only had 1 laptop in Copenhagen and I had 4 adapters. None of them worked. So they ended up bringing me a Danish laptop. Danish laptops are kind of like Norwegian laptops if you've never seen one, in the fact that above the numbers, there are multiple symbols. So it's not just you hit shift and you get the other symbol. There's like a couple of keys that you can hit to get different symbols. I didn't know how to type slash. Like they brought me this laptop. I'm like, I'm doing code spaces. I can do my slides are on GitHub pages. Like they are literally here at this repo. You just go here and click slides and you get my slides. They're marked down slides. And so I'm like, I could do this. I could do this with this borrowed laptop. Someone come type slash for me. So my slash was now Control V because I copied it and I just pasted it where I needed it. And logged into the laptop, went out to GitHub, brought up my slides, and then I did the whole demo through a borrowed laptop and a browser. So I didn't have to install anything, didn't need, and you're gonna see why that is super powerful, and you're gonna have fun with this. So we got 3 more minutes. So yeah. So nobody's a goody two-shoes and wants to sit in the front row except our brave friends over here. So you guys are cool. I like you guys. They all had to sit back. You guys are good. You're cool. So what is last day of the conference? What's the best talk somebody's seen so far? What's your favorite thing you've seen? Anybody? We haven't given it yet. No brown nosing. You don't get any points. I mean, you could put in a couple of green when you leave. I'll take it. But I mean, you're technically only supposed to do 1. They frown at me when I say. Anyways, what's actually another talk you guys saw that was awesome? Did you guys see Nick talk on cursed C#? Is that fun? Why didn't you say that? Why you got brown nose, man? Yeah. Who else saw some good talks? Anybody? Come on. You guys had to have seen something. We're on the 3rd day. Istio? Yeah, Istio's good. Entertaining. All right, got 1 more minute, and then we'll get started. I think they're recording now. All right, so we're not going to do anything live, no demos, no nothing. This is really just going to be about 100, 150 slides. I'm going to talk up here boringly, very monotonous. I mean, I can go really loud like a normal American might, but I'll just mumble my way through it. You guys will find it really entertaining. It's very cool. Every page will be filled with text so that you can read it as I read it to you, just so we're on the same page. Okay, I don't want to make sure that if there's big English words that I Americanize that you don't understand, that I read them to you so you know what we're talking about. You know. I will translate it as well. I guess I could turn on something, but all right, so let's get started. Thank you guys for joining me today. We're going to talk about the power of dev containers and GitHub Codespaces. My name is Chris Ayers. As of last week, this was correct. It might be changing. Senior customer engineer at Microsoft. I'm moving teams, so I was part of a Fast Track for Azure team, which helped customers build and deploy solutions onto Azure. I'm moving into what's called the Azrael team, so I'll actually help make the Azure platform itself. I'll be helping build Azure and making it more reliable and secure. But I'm on all the things. Yes, it's still Twitter. I know I don't pay $8. I'm also on the Mastodon, the LinkedIn. If you notice here, that's my GitHub, Codespaces and dev containers. All of my slides, all of my talks, all of my samples, everything's out on GitHub. So if you want, you can go out there and you can see the raw markdown source, find all the images, all the diagrams, and do whatever, and find all the resources there. So we're going to just talk about kind of what you might need to play around with dev containers. We'll talk about what they are, how they work, and we're going to do a lot of cool things with them. You know, because I want to convince you if you're not using dev containers, you should be, potentially, and there's a lot of reasons why. So I use dev containers in VS Code, and there's a dev containers extension and a GitHub Codespaces extension. I'm going to show you both of these. After about slide 150, I'll show you a picture of it when I get there. You can also use IntelliJ, so you can use some of those other editors. There's a CLI for it. Now, you need Docker. Now, it could be local. Could be on a remote machine. So if there's a remote VM, if you have a cluster, if you use Podman, as long as it's a Docker compliant CLI, you should be fine. And if you want to do Codespaces, you just need a GitHub account and enable Codespaces. And like I said earlier, if you have an individual GitHub account, you get 60 hours free of Codespace usage just by having an account. So every month, just like you get actions, you can get Codespaces. So when we get to slide 200, I'll tell you about Codespaces, and you'll see a picture of it that you can look at. So of course, what are dev containers? These are environments that run in a container. These let you open things, you can mount folders, but also what's awesome is you get to use your local Visual Studio Code UI. So your theming, your window management, your light mode, dark mode, you can copy and paste, all the things, drag and drop, all the things you expect from VS Code, you can do. There's actually a spec on dev containers. It's this open specification that lives out on containers.dev. You can actually see all of the configuration options and things that you can do with dev containers and Codespaces. They're defined there, and we're going to dive into it when I show you a picture around slide 300. So we'll get there. Now, I use Codespaces because it makes life so much easier to onboard people. Who started a new job and it's taken maybe a month to get the machine, the tools, the things installed, configured? Anybody? Month? 3 weeks? 2 weeks? Yeah. Once you get the code, you get all the tools installed. Oh, we're doing node 18. You installed node 16, or the other way around. Or you're using Python 3.9. We're using 3.12. That code you wrote doesn't work anymore. Anyone had that problem before? Anybody a consultant and had a customer using version A over here and different customer using version B over there? Anyone had that problem? And when you install them both, if you're not using NVM or PyEnv or Anaconda, your machine blows up when you install the different versions. Anyone ever had that happen where you break your machine setting up a dependency? Fun, right? We love this stuff. Like, this is part of what we do. We tinker. So, you know, when you try to onboard people, do you want them effective and working within a month? Being able to, like, look at the code. I mean, some of us would say, yeah, that would be nice. Do you, as a new employee, want to be able to, like, hit F5 and debug things without spending a month trying to just bang your head against the wall and constantly ask your coworkers, oh, so it needs to be in that path. Oh, wait, I forgot this environment variable. Oh, I need to put this setting in VS Code to make it work. Oh, like I said, I've had people join our team, install the latest, and then the code they write, maybe it's like they're doing C#8, and they're doing some really cool things with pattern matching. But we have a code base from C#5 or .NET 3, and it doesn't work. And it's like, oh, that cool syntax you did that came out with the new version of C#, it doesn't work in this code base. Sorry, you can't do that. Consistent versions, system conflicts. Who likes to do like a NuGet restore or a pip install when they open a code base? And sometimes you forget and you start coding and you try to start something that doesn't work. Well, we can do all of these things with dev containers. Have consistent versioning, consistent tooling, make sure that we're all using the right packages, that we have startup tasks like scanning or installing. So we can optimize a couple of things. Like a lot of times we use containers in production where we have our OS and runtime and libraries, but we can take that base image that we're using to run things and we can extend it back into our inner loop. And so instead of just using database containers and cache containers and runtime containers, we can actually have all of our tooling and build tools inside the dev container so that we can work better. The main idea is we're going to have a container. We're going to have some sort of volume out to get to our source code, but like Visual Studio Code and some of the CLIs will actually install like the open source VS Code server inside the container, and your desktop version will connect to it. And that means this dev container could be in the cloud, on a remote VM, on your local machine if it's powerful enough, or in GitHub Codespaces. It's very similar functionality in all of these things. And we can specifically define the extensions we want in that dev container, the settings we want. So if we have installed Python, we can say our Python debugger has to be at this path. We're gonna use these settings for PyTest. We're gonna use these settings for .NET. So we can define the extensions, the configuration. We can hit F5 and we can debug. We can start our app. If it opens up a port, it will do the port redirection for you. It pops up. It's like, you want to open this port? So we have a lot of really cool capabilities that I'll show you about slide 400. And so where do they live? They live in the .dev container folder of your repo. So if you open a repo, has anyone ever seen a .dev container folder in a project they're looking at out on GitHub? So it's a JSON file, and you can do things like use an image, use a Docker file. You can actually have multiple dev containers. So they just live in a subdirectory under .dev container. So you could have a backend config, a front-end config, one for markdown slides. Side note, who uses profiles in VS Code? All right, 2 hands. You should use profiles. Who has like more than 10 extensions installed in VS Code? Uh-huh. Who gets annoyed it takes a little while sometimes for all the extensions to initialize? You know you can make profiles. So you can have a .NET profile that only does .NET and doesn't have any Python or Java. You can have a Node profile that only has the Node extensions and not the .NET ones. And you can reduce what initializes every time you start up. Use profiles. Makes it faster. But you can also do the same thing with dev container configs, because you can define extensions that only get installed when you're using that dev container. So you can reduce your VS Code, make it start up faster, make it feel snappier. So when you have this dev container extension installed, you bring up the command prompt and you type dev containers, and you can just go add dev container config files. This will give you choices. This will let you pick and do things. Like there's lots of different options, and I'll show you this. But like we have things like Alpine or Debian or Docker. Like we have options, Docker Compose. There's actually a full, huge list of templates. So so I think of these like base images, these templates. So maybe it's just I want a Debian or Ubuntu. Maybe I want one for C# or Java or Node or Go or Rust. Like I don't need these installed on my machine. I just need Docker and VS Code. I use my personal website on GitHub Pages. I have a Jekyll container for that. All my slides, you'll actually see it in the repo. I have a Markdown workflow, so I have a Markdown container. A lot of my .NET ones, I use the C# container. And if we go out to containers dev, again, this is where the spec is and lives, development containers. Here, full spec. But we can look at the templates. There's a few. Many of them are maintained by the spec maintainers. Let me make it a little bigger for you. So you can see the dev container specs make quite a few, but there's a lot out there that other people make. So different projects, different contributors, different people that have tweaked and built images so that they have the tooling that they want to be able to play around with stuff. Sometimes they've installed like the Azure Functions CLI, and they've set it up so that I can open that up as a dev container, hit F5, debug functions. There's a lot of different capabilities here. Very cool. So I can pick a base image, I can get all the tooling I want, or maybe I go with an Alpine or Debian. This is usually what I do. I go with a Debian. And then I customize it. I can add features. So I can add specific tooling, like the AZ CLI or Docker. I can add extensions and say, hey, I like this extension. I'm going to use this in my code base. I want this setting set in VS Code. I want this command to run. I get really annoyed when VS Code asks me, do I trust this repo? So I add a line in there to tell it to always trust the repo when I open it from a dev container because there's automation in place. I can do port mapping. So if I want port 8000 to map, and there's a full list of some of these features. They're really cool features. I can go out and get individual tooling. I can go get, let me close that guy. Just make sure that's readable. Yeah. I was doing a talk on secure Terraform, and some tools I wanted to use weren't listed. And so I went out and contributed these. There's actually like some documentation on how to write this. Now, I don't know if you can see in the back. That's the scroll bar. It's small. It's small, mean this big. There's a lot of tools out there. So, and if you follow the patterns, if you follow the contribution guides, what this means is whether it's an Alpine or a Debian or an Ubuntu, there's a script format that you can use to download the release from GitHub or install the Docker package or install the deb file. Again, there's a few. In fact, I think that was mine and that was mine that I contributed at the time. So, a lot of capabilities. So if you were starting a new project or you have an existing project and you're like, I need, base Linux stuff, I need JQ, I need NPM, I need Python, you can start with like a node base image. You can install JQ, you could install Python this way, and now you can really start having some fun. Ignore saying that's 22, that's really like 2,000 slides, so just ignore that. So a normal loop we would follow as we're building a dev container is I'd go into my command palette, I'd add my config files, and then I'd have that folder. Maybe I wanted a Docker file, maybe I wanted a compose file because I want to bring up my database or Redis or something. I can reopen in a container, and everything's great. But if it's not, like it actually might give me an error. I've gotten this sometimes on stage where I open a container and something's wrong. Maybe I put the wrong version or the script that somebody used to install something doesn't work. And I can just reopen the folder, make a little tweak, and reopen and rebuild. We'll go through this. We're going to start with an empty project and in a slide or two, and you'll see. Now, the big thing about dev containers that I want to talk about is we're running Docker. We're building these things locally. And what that means is you might need a machine that has a couple of processors that runs Docker or Podman or something like that. And so you might need a little bit of power to do this locally. And not everybody has that. If you do, awesome. I do. But if you don't, and you want to be able to develop on a more powerful machine, you can use Codespaces. You don't need to worry about licensing because Docker Desktop does have a license. Now, it is free for open source learning, things like that. The Docker Desktop has a free license for that. You don't have to use desktop, you just need the CLI, but desktop is nice. But with Codespaces, you can use your local VS Code. Did you guys know you could open GitHub like images directly from your local machine? I'll show you that. But you can also use it in the browser. You can use IntelliJ. You can go up to 16 cores, 64 gigs of RAM. You don't have to build a dev container out of the box. They actually have this universal dev container image that has .NET, Node, Java, Python, all that. I'll show it to you. But something to keep in mind, doesn't matter that I'm on an ARM64 on Windows. When I'm using a dev container through Codespaces, it is Linux and it is x64. You're always going to get Linux and you're always going to get 64-bit. So it doesn't matter what else you're doing. So if you're on a Mac M2 or M1, and you do a Codespace in Azure or in GitHub, Linux 64-bit. Okay? Now, their architecture is very similar. You've got some sort of editor, JetBrains, command line, VS Code, browser, and you spin up a Codespace and it makes a VM and it has all the same stuff. So it's just like dev containers, just GitHub handles all the backend for you. And there's some nice automation around it, which we'll show. They also have a number of templates you can look at. So you can just say, hey, I want to use one. Again, so does dev containers. I'll show you. And I lied a little bit, you know, typical American. I only have like 20 slides. So let's go play with some code. I actually made a slide edit. The width was wrong on one. And yeah, in my repo here, we take a look. I have some Codespaces. So I have multiple. You can see we've got, let me bump that 1 or 2. Make this go away. So you have a friendly name for your slides. You have some sort of image. I'm using Debian. I had a feature commented out. And then, you know, like I said, I have a command. So there's a number of hooks with the dev container lifecycle, like post create, pre-create, post clone. So like you have some hooks on like when it's creating the container or starting the container. I get really annoyed that GitHub asks me, is this a safe directory? So I say, yes, it's always a safe directory. Shut up. Like you can automate that. Do you know that pop-up? Do you trust this? Yeah, I don't get that pop-up anymore. You can see there's various customizations here. So I can come in here and say, for my slides where I use MARP as a markdown. So I actually list a couple of spell checker, like code spell checker, markdown all in one. Here's the extensions I want installed when I open this container. Here's the individual settings. So there's a setting for themes so that it will load them when I preview. Like so I could go here and go to settings, open my settings UI, look for MARP, dot. Here's themes. See, this is customized through the dev container. Just the normal settings. So I don't have to go in there and set it. It's always set when I open my dev container. It's cool. Let me show you something. If you have, and let's just go to the extensions. So if I look for dev containers, this was part originally of the remote development pack. So this is the dev containers pack. You can also get remote development. The remote development pack includes WSL as well as dev containers and SSH. So if you ever want to just use your local VS Code and connect to a remote SSH, yeah, the remote one is awesome. But dev containers. So we've got some options here. Another cool thing to pay attention to is when you open a dev container, let me close this. You open VS Code. Let me open this folder. What will happen is once all my extensions load, let me just give it a sec. Because I have the dev container extension and because I just opened a repo, hey, look, this folder contains a dev container. Would you like to reopen it in this? Yeah, and I can reopen in my dev container. And it's going to ask me which one I want because I have multiple. I'll say I want to work on my slides one. And this, because I've previously built a container, this is going to start it back up, use a local volume and connect to it. Don't worry, we're going to make one from scratch. You'll see that. But there we go. It's doing all the mounting. Looks like I had potentially an error, which happens. But you can see down here, dev container slides on my local machine. So I can see the like the folder I'm in, and then I can reopen it locally if I need to. Now, if you've never seen them before and you install that extension, let me actually close this because I was doing some silly things right before the call. This, I'm gonna go to the command palette. You can say try a sample. So who does Rust? Yeah, not a lot of people. You probably don't have it installed on your machine. They have a Rust sample. So, and I can watch what happens as it builds. You can see it's, because I've built it before, it's using all of these cached images that it's pulled down, and it's starting it up, and it's attaching things. And I'm now attached to Rust, and I can just come down here, I can set breakpoints, and I can hit F5. So I can do F5 debugging. I don't know anything about Rust. I can come over here on the left. I can look at locals. So it's about to spit that out. You know, I can look at statics and call stacks. Like I can go poke around this application, and then I can run it and look at my output or yeah, hello containers. So even if I don't have Rust installed on my local machine and I don't know anything about how to run Rust, I can pull down an image and have the tooling I need installed and configured. And if we look at our dev container, this is going to use Rust. This is going to set up that code thing, and it's just going to work. Now, my favorite one to use, because it is just super powerful, is Node. I do so much with Node with different customers from time to time, but installing the right version, making it all work, it gets annoying. So I can go, just come here to try one of these. I'll try Node. And because I've opened it previously, it remembered I had this file open. If I made an edit, that's all persisted and it remembers it. So, you know, normally when you do stuff with Node, you're going to need to do port mappings. Maybe you're going to open a couple of different things. I can just hit F5. And this is saying it's going to list on port 3000. Hey, look, your application's on port 3000. Would you like to open it in my browser? So I'm on my browser locally, but down here, you can't see it. It paused because I hit a breakpoint. But if I just resume, that works. So I asked earlier who was familiar with Docker. So you know when you spin up Docker, you've got to worry about port mappings, and you got to do the redirections, and you got to, like even if you're doing Kubernetes, you got to do a proxy to be able to access these things. That seems pretty simple. Yeah. And what's cool is you can define, if you already know your app is going to run on certain ports, like you can define that in your spec file and say, hey, this is going to listen on port 3000. It's going to be called this. Let the user know when it starts listening on this port inside the container. So this is running in a different IP space inside a container, and it gets detected when it spins up, and now my local browser, localhost 3000, is redirecting to that container. And you can actually see this. So there's this little ports tab that gets added with dev containers. And I can actually see the name of the port, the port I'm porting, the process it's running, and I could add more. I could, test. I can number 3001, and I can like add a label to it. I can copy the address. I can open it in a browser. I can preview it. What's cool about some of these, and I'll show you when we get there, you can even share these with other people. So if you're working on some code changes in like Codespaces and you want someone to take a look at it, there's some cool stuff we can do with that. But yeah, F5 debugging just right out of a container makes life pretty easy. Now, let me go back to the spec file for a minute. This actually defines all of the things that you can do with this specification. So, if you're looking at wanting to forward ports, you can provide an array. So if you need to forward multiple ports, maybe you do have a database, maybe you do have a cache. We can come in here and set up multiple ports. We can give attributes to those ports and labels. We can actually pass in environment variables. So if you want to have a local variable set in your system that gets passed through VS Code dev containers into the container itself, for configuration, you can do that so that you can pass in stuff so you don't have to check in configuration files. Please don't check in like a lot of those. You can override users very easily and setting IDs. There's a lot of things in the spec file, which is nice. Like I said, we have capabilities for like mounting. So if you want to do different mounts, I've seen a lot of tricks with like .NET. Or the AZ CLI. So when you log in with the AZ CLI, it makes like a little folder with your auth token. And you can technically mount your home directory.az folder into your dev container. So you're already logged into Azure when you're debugging inside a dev container, and it just default Azure credential works through the container. Just like you can do the same thing with like SSH. You can do similar things with the mount and mount points for like your .NET development certificates. You can, like, there's things you can do that are really cool. They also have, and I mentioned we can use images. So we can use images right off Docker Hub or GitHub or Azure, but you can also bring your own Docker file. So for those of you guys that have your own Docker file that you're already using, you can leverage that. And then you can extend it. There's some capabilities here to like use a Docker Compose file and extend the Docker Compose file to add additional services. So you can see we've got lots of cool little things that we can do there, mounting workspaces and doing run args, do stuff with Compose. And then I mentioned, and don't worry, we're going to get into a little bit more of this, like we have some different options and hooks on when we're creating, when we're updating things, post create, post attach. We can actually even wait for different commands to finish. So if you have some dependencies where you're seeding a database or doing an npm restore, like or yarn install, like you can do those. And if you have a hefty dev container where, like I said, you have to have a machine that has multiple processors, you can be like, hey, I need 4 gigs of memory or 32 gigs of memory. I need 4 CPUs or 3 CPUs. Like you can define those things. Because this also works with WSL, and if you do WSL with Docker, you can actually pass through your GPU on Windows, which is fun. So you can be like, hey, I need a GPU with this many cores. Like I'm telling you guys, this stuff is so cool. Auto forward, like as a spec goes, that this gives you just so many different capabilities and don't worry, we're going to play some more. Let me go back. There we go. So I mentioned right now I use VS Code. So we can do customizations for VS Code. This supports settings and extensions. So I can just give it an array of extensions. And Visual Studio itself works with C++ only. C++ Linux, because it needs containers, doesn't work with framework, doesn't work with a lot of stuff the way the process model works. IntelliJ works, and then there's a CLI, and then a bunch of other tools are starting to support dev containers, and they actually have some specific capabilities. So that spec file works for pretty much everybody, but different services have product-specific things, like do you give your Codespace permission to write to your repo? Or do you have some specific files you want to open when you open a Codespace? Or so it's really well defined in what is supported by what. All right, so let's play around some more. So let's make a new one. So Actually, I feel like doing it in Linux today. You guys know you can do this, right? Even from WSL, you can just do code dot and it'll. Did you guys know that? Yeah. So empty folder, cool. Well, let's make a new dev container. So we're gonna add dev container config files. And let me give you a little zoom. So there's some pre-selected ones based on what I do a lot of. You can see we got a lot of choices here. I can also search for one. So, if I wanted to do Python or if I want to do TypeScript, we've got different templates, and we can see we've got some that have a little check mark that they did not pay $8 for because they're not weird people. And then we've got community supported ones. We got all sorts of options. I'm gonna just do, I'll just do C#. That's fine. And see, they have variants. So who wants to try out C# 9? Hey, look, they made a dev container for it. You don't have to install it on your machine. You don't want to throw pre-release software on your machine. You just want to try it in a container and throw it away when you're done. You can do that. And because this is built on Debian, they have different styles of Debian. So let's just do a 9. And now these are the features. Remember I said we had like a gajillion features? Let's say I'm doing some .NET stuff and I want to do the AZ CLI, so I can type AZ and there's the AZ CLI. Maybe I want to do AZD also for the Azure Developer CLI. Cool, okay. I will just keep the defaults. Something I didn't tell you about. Who uses Dependabot on GitHub? Okay, so Dependabot is awesome. You check in a Dependabot config file in .github Dependabot, and you can tell it the ecosystems you want it to look at. What that means is, if I'm doing Node, I can say, hey, I would like you to go look at npm, and what it will do is it will scan your code base, look for packaged JSON files, and if it finds an out-of-date package that has an open security issue or vulnerability or CVE, it'll actually make a pull request and say, hey, I updated you from 101 to 102 of this package. Here's the CVE. Here's the problems with it. Here's the things to worry about. And it opens a pull request. And you can just go out there, try out the pull request and say merge, and it's done. You can do that for npm, NuGet, Pommel, like all the different Java ecosystems. You can do it for GitHub Actions. So if you have workflows that are doing things like Azure Login or Docker Build or Trivy or something, and you want to make sure that they're up to date so that you're getting security updates, it can update your GitHub Actions. Oh yeah, and it can look at your dev containers and see if your features and base images are out of date and suggest that you make them better. So check the box. So now in our empty folder, we now have our dev container file with our two features that I asked for, but we also have our Dependabot looking at our dev container package ecosystem. And again, if you haven't heard of Dependabot, go look at Dependabot. So Dependabot ecosystems. Because I guarantee you guys, it will save your bacon. So yeah, we look at package ecosystem. This one, yep. So bundler, if you're doing Rust, Cargo, Elm, Hex, Git submodules, GitHub Actions, Go, Gradle, NuGet, pip, PNMP, Poetry, Yarn. Like it will go through and it will detect your out-of-date stuff. And on a number of my repos, so there's one that I haven't given the talk in a while, and I need to go update my samples. And I know this because Dependabot was like, hey, you should bump your playwright test from 138 to 148. Here's why. And then like it has commands and stuff, and it like lets me describe what happened. Like if you're not using this stuff, use this stuff. Dependabot's awesome. You can enable it for free. Thank you for my TED Talk. All right. Back to VS Code. So It just added those two things. You can see it's commented out some stuff on forwarded ports and create and all that. Now, if I want, before I reopen it in a container, maybe I forgot something and I want to change those features. So I'm going to do feature, and I can configure my container features, and it's going to take me back here. And so, you know, I've got .NET, I've got AZ, AZD, maybe I would like Terraform or something like Terraform. And I can look down here, and here's an officially supported one with TFLint and TFGrunt. And I can go, okay, and maybe I want to configure options. So now, by the way, those features take parameters if you want. You don't have to. But if you want, like I would like the AZ CLI to install Bicep, and I want TFSec or Terraform docs. And I'll just take the latest version of Terraform and TFLint. Now I have options. But maybe I look at those and I realize I don't really care about the options, so I can just say okay. Or whoops, let me just undo that. Maybe I don't really care about the options. When you add some of these, by the way, like if I add Terraform back and not Terraform, not Terraform, Terraform. Thank you, keyboard. Listen to what I say. If it'll remove those. If you ever say use defaults and you've configured options and you just say use defaults, it will wipe out all your configuration. Like that will go away. So just something to be aware of, like that's a thing. So I say okay, I do configure, I save that and go okay, okay, okay. And then if I go back and configure and say okay, keep defaults. Like, so if there's like when I check this in and I just add the new feature and I do the defaults and then I go look at the diff and I copy my old config and put it back and just keep the one new thing. Like minor annoyance, just saying. So now we can like either hit this and do open or like dev containers open. So there's like, I can attach to one, I can like build and reopen, but I can also come down here to the little bottom where it's WSL. This actually gives you some options. So I could, you know, reopen in a container. Now, if you don't do anything, this will just reopen. But if you want to watch it, you can click this little button here. And then you'll actually see it pulled some stuff. And then the UI kind of reset. So show the log. And now, so the features are added after the Docker image. Features are super powerful, super extensible, but they can be slow because you're building your container, you're doing all your normal container stuff, pulling your base images, applying the .NET, applying the node, whatever you picked. And then after it pulls the images, because I've never built this image before, brand new image, it is using some caching, but then it's pulling these. So the first time might take 2 to 3 minutes. After it gets the image, it then has to run those scripts to go install the AZ CLI, to install AZD, to install Terraform. And depending upon how they wrote the script, it could be fast or slow. It could mean that they do like an apt update, apt install AZ, and then they clear out the apt library caches so that it's smaller. It could be that they have a script that goes out to GitHub releases and pulls it and manually extracts it and installs it. So you have some different options on how those features, and you can see the steps. So now you can see it's doing like an apt and a download. So it all depends upon how they installed or how they chose to install those features. But you can follow along. Yeah. So when you're first building a dev container, features are a great way to add the extra tool that you need. If you've pretty standardized on what you need, what you're going to start seeing is people moving to, they've defined it in a Docker image. That way it's fully cached and can be distributed. And you can even, when we get out to Codespaces, you can pre-build them so that they're pre-built and ready for people to use. So now we're on step 7. Just downloading an image. Yep, it's downloading it's actually downloading from like Git releases, some of these. And I sometimes are hit or miss because on this machine, I'm ARM64. So it's running ARM64 Docker images and ARM64 packages. And sometimes they don't write the script the right way to detect your architecture because they assume x86. In Codespaces in GitHub, it's always x86, so it's a lot easier. So this first time, well, it's taken what, 3-4 minutes because I have a pretty fast machine and the internet here's not the worst. So after it's installed it, I'll actually show you on the extension. So there, it's in my other dev container image. There we go. It looks like it just finally finished. So it should be mounting things now. Yep, there it goes. Started up all the stuff. And if I close this, I'm now in my dev container. And you'll notice that because I said show me the log, it has a dev container shell and it's installing packages. So I usually need to open a new shell so I can be in here, and I have AZ, which we'll complain in a moment. Yep, there's AZ. I've got .NET, got .NET 9, new RC, got Terraform. I've got all the tools I needed for my project here, and I'm going to have the same version for everybody that uses this dev container. And if I come up here to look at installed local ones versus installed in my dev container. So there's actually extensions for this dev container, and it added the HashiCorp Terraform extension for me automatically. It added the C# ones and the Bicep ones. It added some Azure tooling for me. So like, I don't have to worry too much about the extensions because I'm going to get them. And then let's say this is problematic. I run into a problem or I'm missing a tool. What I would usually do, back to that diagram, notice I have reopen in WSL, reopen locally, rebuild it without a cache. So I have some options to go from my dev container back to my local file system so that I can interact with it. And let me put this back down. So if I needed to make a tweak, like I had a startup script or something I needed to tweak, I go from editing the dev container inside VS Code to editing the dev container file in WSL. So that's what you do a little bit. All right, let's talk about Codespaces. So if you didn't notice, there's a little code button here. You click the code button, normally you see this, right? And for a lot of you, you probably see this. You want to clone to HTTPS. I've actually started using the GitHub CLI a lot. I love it because there's great extensions and stuff you could do with it. But there's also this Codespaces tab. So I can actually just hit plus and make a code space, but I can also hit the ... and go to new options. Like I could open it on a branch. I could review a PR. I could pick one of those dev containers I talked about because they use the exact same configuration. I can pick a country, region if I want. I can pick the size of my machine. 16 core, 64 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of disk. But notice if I do slides, that little bottom section didn't show up. But if I do Codespaces, this little bottom section shows up, recommended secrets. Anyone ever need an access key or app ID for any sort of thing they're building ever, and you need to access a shared resource? Wouldn't it be cool if it was defined in your code space that you needed to provide that secret for the development environment to work? You can. You could do it. So I'm going to create a code space. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to come down here. I'm going to quit Docker. Probably. I'll just quit Teams while I'm at it too. So I'm going to close all my local VS Code because, I killed Docker. I was doing Dockery things. I'm still running though. Let me make this a little bit bigger because I'm in a browser. And if you notice, this is saying, welcome to Codespaces. You're on a custom image defined in your dev container JSON. So out of the box, when you open a code space, like You don't even need anything really installed. You don't need VS Code installed. You don't need any of that. I can come here. I can, you know, look at my slides. Now, it doesn't look like I have I think I said the Codespace image, so it doesn't have all the extensions I need to preview my slides. Like that's not working, so I can come back for that. And I have some limited images, but let me go ahead and close this guy and go back to my code base. And I'm gonna go to code, and I'm gonna make a new one, this time just to show you with my slides config. You can have multiple on the same code base. And it's setting up the remote connection, so it's built, again, I don't have Docker running. Don't have VS Code running. So this is building out on GitHub, and I can actually look at the log just like before. I can see some of that information. But now that I've told it my slide config, and I come out here to do the preview, it's actually installing those extensions I want it to install. But when I preview, and it's going to open it twice. Yep. As these extensions finish, because I'm still waiting on the MARP one. I already know it. That's what always happens. It takes it a second. Yeah, MARP was installing. Boom. See, my slides. So now I can work and edit with all the extensions, and I'm doing it in a browser. I don't really like the browser though. You know, I really like doing my local VS Code. So what I can do, and I don't know if you guys realize this, you can actually, there's a whole bunch of settings around Codespaces. Codespaces are really cool. Who uses dot files? Dot files. Hey, look, I can have it automatically install my dot files into my Codespace. So you got all your customization and all of your settings that you like. Boom. You can have that wired right in. Maybe I want those secrets. I have secrets assigned to me that are only available in Codespaces, and I can tell it I only want certain repos to be able to see those secrets. So maybe I have OpenAI key that I need to access my endpoint, and it's mine, and I only want to use it in one repo. I can do that. Maybe I want GPG verification, or I want to have it automatically do my VS Code settings. So when I got my VS Code locally just right, I can have it sync to the one in the cloud. But again, why would I want to use the one in the cloud? You know, maybe I just want to use the one on my desktop. So I said I want to use VS Code on my desktop, not in the web. Or I can use JetBrains or Jupyter Lab. I can have it automatically time out after a certain amount of time, so I can save costs by not using the device when I need it. I can do things around host images if I want to have it automatically rebuild, or I can have it always lock it to a certain region. We got skills. We got things we can do with this. So now I'm going to go back to my repo. Go back to the dev containers one, and I'm going to reopen my Codespace. So remember, these are active, so they're already running. So I can just click on the name, and I don't know if you notice, this running locally. This is not running in Codespaces. So this opened because I've given it permission in the past. Normally it'll prompt you like, do you want to let it open VS Code locally? I said yes. So this is actually setting up like a remote SSH connection to that host that's running in GitHub Codespaces. So this is GitHub Codespaces connected, and I can actually see it down there at the bottom. Codespaces doing stuff in the cloud. Cool. Pretty neat, huh? Side question: who uses Python? So the core project that's like the heart of Python, that's like the core execution engine, CPython. Anyone ever want to contribute to Python? Look, they have wonder what that is. Dev container folder in CPython. Take a look. They got a dev container. So they have an image they're using for Python. They have commands. They have, hey, fix some permissions every time you create this. Hey, we have some customizations. Here's the extensions we want you to use if you're building and contributing to Python, which is awesome because this lowers the bar for you to help contribute to open source projects. Remember we said like sometimes you might want to have some settings to like hard code, like your styles, which I don't know why they're not using an editor config, but different topic. But they've defined the settings that they want to use to contribute. That's super powerful. Now, what about something like, I do home automation. Anybody do home automation, home assistant? Yeah? You know where this is going. Let's look at their core home assistant project. Hey there, what's that? We got a dev container. So what's interesting about this is they're using a Docker file. Notice they also do the safe directory command. They don't want to be bugged by do you trust this folder. But they're setting environment variables, they're adding features, they're mapping ports for testing, they have arguments on how they want you to contribute. They have a ton of extensions you can leverage and a ton of settings. And we can just go out and look at their Docker file. I think it was in, what was the path to that thing? I forgot it already. Docker file dev. So that would just be in core. I don't remember seeing it. Oh, view all files, duh. So there's their Docker file for production. There's their Docker file for dev. And they're using the dev container Python as a baseline. They're doing some tweaks. They're installing their packages. So not only are they running those base tools that they need, they're also adding all of the development tools. Last thing I want to show you real quick. So try Node, GitHub. I want to go back to this. That sample I did before, except this time I want to try to open it on a code space. Okay, that's not the right place. Where do I need to go? Okay, I know where I need to go. I'll go to this project. So one of the really cool things about Codespaces that I think is really powerful. Let's just do this one. This is fine. What I love is you can share ports from GitHub Codespaces to pretty much anywhere. So if you start an app and you know it's listing on port 8000 and you're doing some changes locally and I want you to review it, what I can do is, and depending upon how quickly this takes to spin up, I don't think it takes forever. And I know we've got about 5 minutes left and I want to give you guys a couple minutes for questions. So I'm just going to go into 11. Okay. Yep. Wait, no, and I didn't define anything. This is just their default image. Like, so it didn't pick up my base one. So this is using Python, no Docker and everything. Like, so hopefully this works. And I mistyped it. I already see that. For some reason, it's a little sluggish right now, and it wasn't a few minutes ago. So I'm guessing somebody's talk just finished and everyone just got on their phone. That's my theory on this. But when you do the ports and you forward a port, and we're like forward and port 5000, yeah, I have to have it running. Okay, there we go. .NET run. Come on, we can do this. Don't make a liar out of me yet. So what you can do is you can actually share the port. And what's nice is this is not something that can be used for malicious intent. When I share with you guys the URL and I want you to see it, it's cool. The person going to it, it actually is like, hey, you're opening a site on GitHub. We're sharing it with you. Do you actually want to go here? Like it prompts you. So That's not been exposed yet, so I can come here. You see how it says private. I can actually change it to public and have a public URL, which, come on, open the public URL. There we go. So and so you can't like clone somebody's thing and send them a link and have them log into their bank or something. It's like, this is a development port by somebody that we wanted to share with you. And then you can go look at it running in my private code space, running in a port from my dev container that's in my repo in the cloud and GitHub, and give me feedback. What's also awesome is when I'm doing work in pull requests, like a lot of times when you're in a pull request for something, if you're part of the org, you can actually like go and open it in a code space. Like you can open pull requests in code space to review. There it is, code, like open a code space to review this. So it's really, really, really powerful. Now, I want to save a couple minutes for you guys' questions, and then I will also leave this up here. Feel free to reach out, but also go to my code bites on GitHub. All my other talks are there, and you can find all of these links there. So questions? Yes. If you're doing .NET framework or you're doing something that's very like, I need like a dongle or a device, like, but for a lot of things where if you have a lot of side-by-side things, this is ideal. And I actually like love, there's like learn modules, there's videos on this. And if you look out at the Visual Studio documentation, they actually have a ton of really cool scenarios on like attaching to existing containers. There's some advanced topics in here that you can dive into, like working with multiple or non-root users. Like there's all sorts of different interesting things, better performance. One thing I've run into, just as a aside, if I'm ever on Windows and I clone a repo and I mount it into dev containers, underlying Windows doesn't have permissions or line endings. Linux does have permissions and line endings and capitalization. So I check in a git attributes file to handle the conversion for me. Otherwise, it might say like, you have a Windows file, you touched a Linux and it changed line endings, and now you modified every file in your repo. If you ever see that, go look up git attributes. It will make your life easy, and it solves all that problem. Other questions? As a what? The question was, will Codespaces be available on Azure DevOps? I don't know if they're available on Azure DevOps. You can use GitHub with Azure DevOps as far as like use GitHub for your repos, and you can use Codespaces there. Microsoft has the idea of dev boxes as well as the virtual desktop. Like, so there's some other options there that are not as easy as Codespaces. Yeah. Other questions? Yes. Yes, you can run the dev container on a different machine. That's why I said you just need Docker, and that can be a remote Docker. So that is just like I can, connect to, a host or attach to a running container somewhere else. Like I have those type of options where I can tweak those things. Yes, sir. Yep. Yep. So that's actually depends on the host, I will say. So you can add multiple mounts. So if I'm on Windows, if I've cloned it on Windows and I open a dev container and I'm running a Linux container on top of the Windows file system, it works, but there can be a couple second delay. If I'm in WSL and I do a dev container, the watchers work instantly. There's actually a third option I really didn't get into, but I use quite a bit. So if let's just say I pick a repo, let me close this. I pick a repo at random, code, local, HTTPS copy. I go to VS Code. I'm going to make a new window. You can clone a repository into a container volume. So there's no WSL, there's no local file system. It's, hey, go get this repo. I stopped Docker. That's right. I had turned off Docker, but you can clone it directly into a container volume and then mount the image to that, and that performance is even better. Just saying. So you have a slider of how much you want to do. So here it is, clone into a container image, and then it will open a dev container on top of that. The extensions are also, yeah, so it's doing the clone and all that. Another thing I don't think I dug into enough is that dev container extension is super nice. Let me go to the dev container extension, make sure it's on this profile, because you can see any running extensions. Like you can see them, you can interact with them. Like it's kind of like the Docker one. Like I can see my individual containers there. I can go delete them. I can see my images. I just thought there was a dev container image or control thing, but dev container. Yeah, clean up dev containers, clean up volumes, explore a volume in a dev container. Like you can, yeah, you get power. All right, what else? Anybody else? Yes. So .NET works fine in Visual Studio. As far as I know, right now it's just C++, but I know that the ask is out there. A lot of people ask about it because I like Visual Studio as a whole as well. So, you know, is Visual Studio support coming? I hope so. I'll keep bugging Mads. All right, who else? Yes, because it works. So the question was, can you use dev containers with remote pair programming? Yes, you can actually do some interesting things with, you can use the live share extension in Visual Studio to share your thing. Another weird thing I've done, which is interesting, is if you open your repo in VS Code in the web, and then you open the repo in VS Code locally, and you edit a file here, you see the edits there in real time. It's kind of cool because you're modifying the underlying file system and you're just looking at it through the lenses of two containers. So like, I've done fun stuff. But the live share extension is the one I would recommend. If you've never used that, it is amazing. Live share. It is ideal for code programming. You can even do like, you both have it, you say live share, they can see where their cursor is, they can highlight, like you can do all sorts of really, really cool stuff. You can invite people, like you have control. Like if you're trying to do pair programming, look at live share if you haven't. Yeah. Anybody else? All right, we're at time, everybody. I want to thank all of you amazing people for being here. I want to get a quick selfie before we go, if that's all right. Hey, I have to feed my ego somehow. I'm a fat, lazy American. Come on. You gotta give me something. Everybody, hi. Thank you. Oh, put in the greens. Put the greens in if you don't mind. I would appreciate that.